Hey, it's the Heretic Chick, Kristen, and I'm back. I have been gone for quite a while. I think it's been a couple months now since I've made a video. And I feel like I should say I've missed it, but I haven't been I haven't been missing it. I enjoyed my little sabbatical. But I do feel a little bit guilty. Sometimes some of you are so nice and you make me feel guilty. So I did want to just touch base, and I'll explain what's been going on in my life and why I haven't been making videos. I can explain that at the end because I don't want to waste time for those of you who really don't care and you're just here for talking about the Bible, which is obviously the important thing. So anyway, what I want to share today, my first day back, is I want to share with you something that happened at church on Sunday. So my husband and I are attending this church, and it's it's definitely a futurist church, but it's full of a lot of really great people. I mean, I think the people there are, for the most part, just top-notch people. So I might not agree with their eschatology, but that's okay. I mean, I'm working on them. I'm trying, but I'm not getting very far. Anyway, and if you're new to the channel, I'm a heretic because I just don't believe what the modern church tells us that we have to believe, or maybe what the church fathers or some creeds say we have to believe. And a lot of the people that listen to this channel or other channels like that are just people who have a very high opinion of God's word and the words of Jesus. And so we just want to think for ourselves and come up with explanations that align with the teachings of Jesus and not care so much about what man has to say about it, if there's some sort of disagreement, which in the case of eschatology, there is. So anyway, back to church. So on Sundays at our church, there's like a sermon, and then they also offer these classes, which are supposed to be kind of like a semi-small group, although I'll say at this point it's called ABF, Adult Bible Fellowship. There's probably on a given Sunday, maybe I would guess there were like 40 people there this past week. Actually, it was like a week and a half ago that this happened. But so anyway, there's like time for just chatting and getting to know each other, and then they do prayer requests, and then you have a lesson. And so in this ABF, which they're by age, so there's like a 10-year age window. So most people in this class are around my age, although a little younger, I would say, most of them. But anyway, we've been going through the book of Matthew. And sometimes my husband and I think about like leaving, trying to find a different church, but the reality is there's no perfect church. There's no perfect people. And so, plus, they're going through the book of Matthew, and Matthew is the gospel that got me and my husband on our road to heresy. So I want to hear their explanations for these different passages in Matthew. So we've been waiting and waiting, and they came to Matthew chapter 16. So we were so excited about this because I don't know if you guys are familiar with Matthew 16 verses 27 and 28, but those verses are some of the most difficult verses to interpret. If you read the commentaries, there's going to be a lot of maybe disagreement or differing opinions on what is meant by these verses. So I'm going to read these two verses to you really quick, just so that you know what we're talking about, in case you're not familiar. This is Matthew 16, 27 and 28. For the Son of Man is going to come, and I have to jump in and say that it should actually read, the Son of Man is about to come. There's a Greek word in there, mello, and mello means about to. So if you don't believe me, look that up. You can just, Google Greek interlinear for Matthew 16:27, and you will see that the word mello is in there, and that mello means about to. So I'm going to read it that way. For the Son of Man is about to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly, I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So you can guess why this is a difficult passage for churches today, because Jesus is saying there that some of you standing here are not going to die. You're not going to taste death. You're not going to be dead. You're going to still be alive when something happens. And what is the something? The something is when you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So that confuses a lot of people. What is he saying? Because obviously Jesus hasn't returned yet. I mean, that's what most people would say. So how could Jesus say there were still going to be people alive when he came in his kingdom? And is that what he meant? Was Jesus a liar or a false prophet? So let me tell you what happened in our ABF. So the teacher that day, nice guy, he had to do the whole chapter. So of course he got to the last two verses, and I was actually trying to record it on my phone because I wanted to not forget what he said so that I could, kind of accurately share it with you. And he didn't actually get to these two verses until 1 minute and 30 seconds before the lesson was over. So he only had a minute and a half to go over two of the most challenging verses in the Bible. Maybe that's intentional, because it's uncomfortable to have to teach on things that we're not really sure about. So I don't know, maybe it wasn't intentional. But he explained that he believes here that Jesus is talking about the Transfiguration. And that was Jesus coming in his kingdom. Peter, James, and John were about to see Jesus sort of glorified, transfigured before their eyes. And that was a vision of him coming in his kingdom. And so obviously that happened before they died. So that is what Jesus was talking about. And I'll give him credit because he did say that he was only 80% sure that that was the correct interpretation. And he mentioned that there are other explanations if you read commentaries, but he felt that was the most obvious one. And so that's what he was going with. He didn't actually mention what the other explanations are, but I can guess. I mean, I think there are some people who would say it was Pentecost when the Holy Spirit was poured out on the disciples. That was Jesus coming in his kingdom. Or some people have even said the resurrection or the ascension was Jesus coming in his kingdom. So, but what he didn't, so that's basically all he said. And then he said, how do we know it's the Transfiguration? And then someone in the class raised their hand and said, because we know that Jesus wasn't a liar, right? Jesus wasn't a liar. So the thing that he's talking about had to happen before some of those people died, because he said that it would happen before they died. And even though it kind of sounds like he's talking about his second coming, well, they just said the thing I said before, that we know that it's the Transfiguration because it had to happen before some of those people died. What they mean by that is he couldn't be talking about his second coming, even though it kind of sounds like that's what he's talking about, because that didn't happen before those people died. So therefore, ergo, it must be the Transfiguration. So I want to dig into that a little. Unfortunately, there was no time left for questions. It was like, oh, class is over, bye, and we didn't get to discuss anything. So I wanted to discuss some of the objections to that interpretation that Jesus was here talking about the Transfiguration, because this is important for Christians, but it's also important for people who are trying to defend Christianity against like atheism, this to me seems like a perfect verse. And I know atheists do use this verse to say that Jesus was a false prophet. What objections are they going to bring to the table as to why Jesus here could not have been talking about the Transfiguration? So what I did was I used ChatGPT. I'm kind of obsessed with it now. I use it all the time, and I know it's cheating and you can't trust it and technology is evil, whatever. Well, you know, you can use it for good, you can use it for evil. It came up with some really great, I mean, honestly, atheists might be using ChatGPT to come up with their objections to this passage, so we better be able to defend it. And I was really impressed with ChatGPT. We're going to go over what it said, and then I'm going to give you some objections that I came up with on my own, out of my own head, without even using the cheat sheet. So I was kind of proud of myself. So let's dig in. Okay, so first objection to saying that the Transfiguration is the coming of the Son of Man in his kingdom, like Jesus said in that before some of them standing there died. ChatGPT said it's a mismatch in language and imagery. And it talks about how in verse 27, it talks about the Son of Man coming with his angels in the glory of his Father and repaying everyone according to what they have done. This is it says it's echoing themes from Daniel chapter 7 and Matthew 25 and Revelation 19. We're going to get into that in a minute. But so let's look at the Transfiguration. Did the Transfiguration have Jesus coming in the glory of his Father with his angels? I don't remember any angels being mentioned at the Transfiguration. And did he repay everyone according to what they had done at the Transfiguration? No. This seems like a big problem to me. Again, let's just read the verse so you understand these two verses, okay? Verse 27 and 28. For the Son of Man is about to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So, Transfiguration, we don't have angels. We don't have rewarding and repaying. We don't have like rewards and judgment and angels. Okay, let's move on. Temporal and literary disconnection. Okay, so what it means by that is that verse 27 and verse 28, according to ChatGPT, are tightly connected both thematically and grammatically. Verse 28 begins with, "Truly I say to you," a common phrase used to underscore the immediacy and significance of what follows. I think Don Preston actually, I heard him once say that when Jesus uses that phrase, "Truly I say to you," it always is linking that verse with the previous passage. It's never introducing a new topic, ever. So Jesus isn't suddenly in verse 28 saying, "Truly I tell you," and let's talk about something different. No, he's expounding on what he was just talking about, which was the Son of Man coming in the glory of his Father with his angels to reward and repay. This is the topic. So verse 28 seems to imply that this event would happen within the lifetime of some of the listeners. Well, it doesn't just seem to imply that. I mean, that's what Jesus said. He said, some of you will not taste death before you see this happen. Okay? Some of you are going to be alive when this takes place. And then it says, this raises interpretive difficulties if the transfiguration a mere week later is inserted between them as the fulfillment. Because obviously we just said, how can it be the fulfillment if it didn't involve angels, judgment, rewards? And it's only a week later. So why would Jesus say, some of you are still going to be alive when this happens. I mean, what kind of prophet is that to say some of you will still be alive next week? I mean, doesn't make sense. Number 3, the limited scope and audience of the Transfiguration. So the Transfiguration only to James, John, and Peter, right? Whereas Matthew 16:27, it says, displays Christ's glory, affirms his identity, and constitutes a visible coming in his kingdom. So critics would argue that the fulfillment must be of a greater scale and significance. So the scale and significance of just being to 3 people, where Jesus in this passage is speaking to a much wider audience. So the fulfillment would have to be a wider audience. And then this, even number 4, brings up some alternatives, and the alternatives listed were the resurrection. Okay, there were angels involved in the resurrection, check. Did he come in the glory of his Father at the resurrection? I'm probably going to say no, because remember when Mary was clinging to him, and didn't he say, don't cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father? Does one passage say I haven't been glorified? Maybe I'm making that up, but I don't think that I would say the resurrection definitely isn't when he rewarded and repaid, right? There was no judgment at the resurrection of the evil. There was no rewards for the good at the resurrection. The ascension, you could think of maybe Jesus being displayed in his glory as he ascended to the Father, but yet again, we don't have. And there were angels after the ascension. They said, behold, what are you looking at? You know, why are you staring up into the sky? But yet again, we don't have the judgment. We don't have the rewards. And then one of the other possible explanations for what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 16 is, it says, the destruction of Jerusalem, seen by some as a judgment coming of Christ on the old covenant system. There's a lot of asterisks next to that, so I don't know why. Each of these interpretations offers a potential understanding of the coming of the kingdom that aligns better with the broader witness of Scripture and history, while remaining within the lifetime of Jesus' contemporaries. So it's saying that all of these others are better explanations than the Transfiguration, but I really see them as all being equally bad. And except for the destruction of Jerusalem. And, you know, when you think about it, the destruction of Jerusalem happened 40 years later. And then it would make sense for Jesus to say, some of you are still going to be alive 40 years from now when this happens. Of course, it's a whole nother video on how the judgment of Jerusalem was the coming of Christ. All the metaphors that are used in Matthew 24, 25, in the book of Revelation, like coming on the clouds. Coming on the clouds, the Lord came on the clouds, did you know this? Many times in the Old Testament in judgment of different nations. So he came on the clouds. He rode on a swift cloud and came to Egypt, right? This is a prophecy of the destruction of Egypt. So some of this language that we have been taking literally in our mind, we're going to have to reinterpret that. But I think it's safe to say that this cannot be the Transfiguration. Jesus didn't come with angels to reward and repay at the Transfiguration, and it wouldn't have made sense to say, and next week will be before some of you die. So now here's a couple other things that I came up with on my own without my cheater. So I just want to look at those really quick, and that is Matthew 25:31. So let's look at Matthew 25:31. verse 31. It says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne." And he goes on, "Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place some on his right and some on his left, saying, 'Inherit the kingdom.'" So here we have Jesus, the Son of Man, coming in his glory, all the angels with him, and he offers his rewards and repayment there. He separates the sheep from the goats and says to some, "Come, sit at my right hand. You visited me, you fed me, I was thirsty and you brought me a drink." And to those on the left, he says, "Go into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." So this is the exact same language as Matthew chapter 16, okay? Coming with his angels to reward and repay. Same thing here. He's coming. This is Matthew 25:31. Coming in his glory with all the angels. And it goes on to talk about his rewards and repayment. So Matthew 25, let me make this point. Matthew 25 is clearly talking about the same thing as Matthew chapter 16. I hate to beat the dead horse here, but coming in glory with angels to reward and repay. Exact same. But, hang with me, Matthew 25 took place after the Transfiguration. Am I correct? I think I'm correct here. So if Matthew 16 is talking about the same thing as Matthew 25, but it hadn't yet happened yet in Matthew 25, right? Jesus is still talking about when it happens, when the Son of Man comes, then he will do these things. So it's still in the future, but this is post-Transfiguration. So therefore, it can't be the Transfiguration, right? It's still in the future after the Transfiguration. And let's look at another verse to prove that point. Revelation 22:12. Okay, Revelation 22:12. "Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done." Okay, so Revelation 22:12, we have him coming to repay each man according to what he has done. That is the exact same thing that Matthew 16 is talking about, right? Coming to repay each man according to what he has done. Now, that verse doesn't mention angels, but I mean, is there anyone that's going to argue that, is there another coming of the Lord to repay each man according to what he has done? There's only one. So this is it. And yet again, Revelation was written after the Transfiguration. So whatever this is, this coming to reward and repay, it had not happened yet when it was written, and that was after the Transfiguration. So the Transfiguration cannot be what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 16. And in fact, we can eliminate, just by this passage in Revelation, we could also eliminate all the other possible explanations like the Ascension, the Resurrection, Pentecost. All of those are out because it's still in the future when the book of Revelation was written. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense? So now, remember what we just read. Now we're going to kind of tie it all together. In Revelation, it said, "Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done." So we have some time statements. Revelation, when Revelation was written, it was going to happen soon. Whatever it is, this coming in the kingdom to reward and repay with angels in the glory of the Father, it's soon. In Matthew 25, we also have a very clear time statement. You might not realize it, but Matthew 25 is really just a continuation of Matthew 24. let's look at that. Sorry, I should have had it already pulled up. Okay. Matthew 25, the first word of Matthew 25 is then, meaning at that time. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. So Matthew 25 is a continuation of Matthew 24. At that time, at the time of Matthew 24, what we've just been talking about, read Matthew 24. It's this thing that most of us, if we aren't heretics already, always thought in our mind was in our future: wars, rumors of wars, famines, earthquake, pestilence, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds. We thought that was in our future, but if you're a heretic like me, you understand now that Jesus was actually using Hebraic apocalyptic language to talk about the destruction of Jerusalem that occurred in 70 AD, which was the nail in the coffin of the Old Covenant, let's put it that way. But the last, Matthew 24:34, the end of Matthew 24, near the end, it says, truly I say to you, remember, truly, or I tell you the truth. We're always just tying it together. We're not introducing a new subject. So all these things he's been talking about, the Son of Man gathering, the stars falling, all of that. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. There's a time statement there, right? What is he saying? This generation will not all be dead before these things take place. Does that sound familiar? Actually, that sounds a lot like Matthew 16:27 and 28. He says, some of you standing here, this generation, will not have died when this happens. And he uses the same exact verbiage that he uses in Matthew 25 about coming to reward and repay. And Matthew 25 has this time statement built into it, if you read it in context, Matthew 24:34, that's going to happen in this generation, the generation of people alive 2,000 years ago. In the book of Revelation, which was written later, says it's going to be soon. In fact, it says it's near, it's coming quickly. So, I don't know. Tell me in the comments what you think about that. If you have any other reasons why you think the Transfiguration is a good example of, or good explanation for what Jesus was referring to in Matthew 16. But I got to be honest with you, I'm not seeing it. And that is one of the verses, along with Matthew 24:34, when Jesus said, all of these things will take place in this generation, or before this generation has passed away. All these things will have taken place. Not some of them, all of them. And, there's a lot of people that try to put, what they do is they might try to put a break in between certain parts of Matthew 24, or in between verses 17 and 18, or 27 and 28 of Matthew 16. When he says some of you won't taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom, he's not talking about the verse right before where he talks about angels and rewarding and repaying. Those two different topics. But ask yourself, does that make sense? Just allow yourself to ask the question, does that make sense? Is Jesus introducing a new topic? And if so, why? What is our explanation for it? The explanation for it that a futurist gives is just, it has to be, because otherwise Jesus is a liar, because we can't see how he fulfilled this. We can't see how Jesus' second coming happened in the lifetime of these people that were standing there in front of him. But is it possible? Is it possible that we have misinterpreted what that coming would look like? So, from a heretic's point of view, that coming was the end of the old covenant. And maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal to you. Maybe you thought the old covenant was already done away with at the cross. A lot of us thought that, but keep in mind that the Jews were still continuing to offer sacrifices. In fact, Paul was going into the temple and making vows. So the old covenant hadn't actually passed away. I think we could say it was in the process of passing away. It was growing old and about to vanish, right? Growing old. And in 70 AD, it was completely and forever destroyed. So it was a big deal. And that was the sign of the fact that Jesus was the Messiah. He is the new covenant, and he proved it to them when he came and destroyed their city and their temple and their old way of life, their old world. So, I don't know. I hope that was helpful to you, but I do, if you have any comments or objections, feel free to leave them in the comments. And then other people, you can help me out. If I don't have time to answer the comments, you guys can answer them for me. So, yeah, so anyway, the reason I haven't been making videos is because, well, you guys know, oh, someone's here. Oh boy, this is embarrassing. Now my husband's employees see that I'm making videos, but anyway. Yeah, so anyway, my dad had an accident. He got hit by a car on a golf cart. He almost died, but he broke his neck, all his ribs, and his back. But it was touch and go for a while, but he's done amazingly well. I can't even believe how far he's come. And we were supposed to go on a cruise together to Alaska, and this accident happened 6 weeks before we were scheduled to leave, so we were like, there's no way. Well, he actually improved enough. He was able to go. He wore a neck brace, and he took a walker. So that was really neat, because the whole reason we took the cruise was for his birthday. It was his 80th birthday gift and my mom's 75th birthday gift. So it was really special that he went. It was really hard. Very, very challenging to get through airports and just get around on the ship and get on buses and, with someone who's elderly and, that beat up. But he did it. So we made it, and Alaska is just beautiful. And then, but my husband couldn't go because he has a construction company, and it's just hard for him to get away in the summer for that long. So he wasn't able to go. So then we came back, and then we took our family vacation where he was able to go. And we went south, and we went snorkeling in a place called Bonaire, which is kind of near Aruba, and it was just so beautiful. I love the ocean. I love fish and snorkeling, and I've said this before, but it sounds silly, but it's a true thing for me, that when I read the book of Revelation as a futurist, I was so sad when I got to the part that said, and there was no more sea. That just broke my heart, because I love the ocean. I'm just so fascinated by the whole ecosystem of it, and the fish and the crabs and the little, we kept getting stung by these things that we thought were jellyfish, but we couldn't see them. Later I find out they're like sea lice. I think they're called sea lice. But, there's just all these little invisible things floating around, and other things are eating them, and other things are eating them, and then these fish are so beautiful and colorful, and yeah, so, and the sea turtles and the stingrays, it was great. But to think, why would God create this beautiful ocean environment and then just destroy it? Just no more. We don't need that anymore. It really made me sad. Now that I know that the sea was a metaphor for Gentiles, the Gentile nations. Being in the land was the land of Israel. It meant being part of God's family. And the sea was being outside of it, And so in the new heaven and the new earth, this new covenant, if you're in the new covenant, then you aren't a Gentile. You're part of it, right? There's no more sea in the new covenant. No more Gentiles in the new covenant. So, I don't know. That made me so happy as a preterist to realize that I didn't have to say goodbye to the ocean. So, and the other thing about the ocean, that this is kind of off topic, I'm rambling, but the other thing that was so cool was that, so I have a fish. It's just a little betta fish at home. And if you have a fish, I don't know if you guys have an aquarium, but it's so much work. You know, you have to like put these chemicals in, and you have to put these little pH strips in and test and make sure that everything's just right, and it can get all out of whack, and then you have to add more chemicals, and then you get algae, and then you get and then all your fish die. But the ocean is like this huge thing, and somehow it just stays in balance. That's the thing that I'm swimming around, and you see all these fish, and you know, they're just all keeping it going. You know, somehow God created it to just work, you know, and like we try to recreate it at home in these little aquariums, and it doesn't work, you know, or we try to make it work, but it's a lot of work. So, and then we went to the mangroves. Sorry, it's really windy today, which is great because it's supposed to be 94 degrees or 93 degrees here today, so it's super hot. So I'm thankful for the wind. But I do have a new microphone, so I'm hoping that maybe will block out the wind, but I actually don't know if I turned it on. So hopefully. But, okay. We went kayaking in the mangroves. And then you got out of the kayak and you got to snorkel through the mangroves, which I've never done that before. And you go down under the water and you look, and the roots of the mangroves form like a little shelf. And if you look under the shelf, you see all these fish. There's just like fish everywhere under there. And they were explaining to us that the mangroves in the water there is like super salty. And I tasted it, and it's like way saltier than the ocean water. And that's because, I'm going to try to explain this correctly, but I don't know. The mangroves, you know, they are getting their moisture from the water, the ocean water, and God has given them basically like kidneys, like we have, to filter out the excess salt. So the trees are actually spewing back into the water the excess salt, and then it makes the water saltier. And so there's certain fish that can tolerate that, but not all the fish. You know, you're going to see a lot different type of fish in the mangroves than you are just out snorkeling around the coral reef. So even that, it's just so fascinating how the whole ecosystems work, and how there's different environments for the different species. And anyway, yeah, God's creation is really just amazing, and it was fun to get to explore it and enjoy it. And now I'm back, but good old Indiana has its own charm, so you know, it's pretty here too, but not quite as fishy. The last thing I was going to tell you is that my husband hurt his back. So actually, my husband, Bing, his real name's Matt, but I call him Bing. Everybody calls him Bing. If you ever meet him, call him Bing. He's supposed to be at that Predators Conference out in Montana, and when we got back from vacation, just out of the blue, I don't know why, all of a sudden his back started hurting, and it just got so bad that suddenly, like, he couldn't move. He could only lie down on the floor. I mean, he couldn't even get in a bed, really. The bed hurt. He had to lie on the floor. And that was it's been like 10 days now. It's going on 2 weeks. Yesterday was the first day that he was up. And when I say up, I mean he could walk to the car, and I drove him around to different job sites. And, hold on. Sorry, I was letting that truck pass because it was going to be really loud. But anyway, I drove him around to job sites, and he just like would get out for a minute and look and get back in. And I mean, he can't even sit in a chair. It's his SI joint, I think, and so sitting is really painful on that, apparently. But so by the end of the day yesterday, which was the first day that he had been upright in like 10 days, he was actually feeling pretty good. And I got him in with a chiropractor. But today he's kind of not feeling great again, so I don't know. But he's supposed to be out in Montana at the Predators Conference, and he couldn't go because there's no way he could, fly on a plane and sit. So that's sad. So you can all send up your prayers for him that he gets better, because there's a lot of work to do around here. Plus, he is in a lot of pain. I feel bad for him, but I also need him to help me out a little, so. Yeah, well, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully I'll be able to make some more videos, but my daughter, she's on a retreat in Wyoming. She's going to be getting back on Sunday, and then my other daughter gets home and will be home for like a week, and then she goes back to college, and then the other one in September goes to Hawaii for 4 months. So I don't know how many I'm going to be able to squeeze in before September, but maybe in September I'll be able to be more regular about it. So, but anyway, it was good to be back. I hope you guys have all been doing well, and I miss you.